CNBC-TV18 and Palo Alto Networks presents Securing the Way Forward.
Well, the pandemic forced most businesses to adopt digital technologies. In fact, digital technology adoption was almost on steroids through the course of the last 2.5 years. Even as the pandemic has receded, digital transformation and digital adoption continues to be a big theme across businesses globally and here in India as well. To talk to us about the road ahead for digital adoption, but more importantly, one of the big risks associated with it, cybersecurity risks, is Nikesh Arora, the Chairman and CEO of Palo Alto Networks. Nikesh, many thanks for joining us here on The Record. Appreciate your time. This is your first visit to India post the pandemic.
Indeed. Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Well, you know, as I said, digital adoption on steroids through the course of the pandemic. We have spoken through the pandemic about what you were seeing in terms of added risks on cybersecurity, and that's only going to increase. This is, in fact, one of the top risks that CEOs are penciling into their agenda. As you look at where the landscape is today in terms of adoption, in terms of capability building to deal with this risk, where are we on the curve?
I think what the pandemic showed us was that every company, bar a few, is a technology company, because everything else vanished. Legacy business, traditional business vanished. You wanted to be in a zero-touch environment, and technology came to the rescue. So, you know, I had a bunch of conversations with people in India recently, and they're saying, you know, business went up tenfold on the technology side, adoption went up across the board. So we became a very technology-reliant society across the globe. And when that happens, it expands the risk of security hacks. It expands the exposure that cybersecurity brings to your business. So clearly, that acceleration of technology, that acceleration of digitization, which to be honest is not stopping. It's the new normal. It's going to continue. It's just exposed the cracks that people have from a cybersecurity perspective.
You know, you talk about cracks, and there are many cracks at this point in time, and some external, which you have no control of, but many, as you point out, for instance, dealing with cybersecurity, internal, that you do have some control on in terms of mitigation. But given the challenges that CEOs are faced with, do you believe that spends on things like cybersecurity may take a hit, at least in the near term?
Look, this is an interesting debate. You know, there's a debate globally, as you and I are well aware of, around whether there's a recession, whether there's a soft landing or a hard landing. And there's a debate on, if push comes to shove, what are people going to reprioritize? I don't think people are going to reprioritize technology adoption. I think we've all understood from the pandemic that we were woefully unprepared to deal with the current world, and the pandemic has shown a big light on it. So everybody's gone and accelerated plans for digital transformation, cloud transformations, and security is coupled with that, because pretty much in any industry, if your systems don't recover, you'll be shut down. Whether it's financial services, whether it's healthcare, the risk is just too high. So I don't think we're going to see a reprioritization of cybersecurity. Having said that, if the shock to the system is large enough and sustained enough, we will see trimming on the edges. And that trimming will impact every part of your spend, be it technology or cybersecurity.
Given the previous boom and bust cycles that we've gone through, the corrections that we've gone through, how do you look at what's happening currently, and how long do you believe this period of pain is likely to continue?
I mean, to think about it, as we said, you know, the pandemic scenario forced all risks to be eliminated because the pandemic in itself was a big risk. And we start going into a risk-on mentality. People say, well, there's a backstop. Banks are backstopping me. The government's backstopping me. Money is being injected to the economy. I can go grow unabated. And we put a premium on growth. And that resulted in valuations. People said, it doesn't matter if you make money today. Money is free. You don't have to spend any money. You don't have to pay any interest. You can load on debt. You can go borrow money. You can create liquidity. So there's tons and tons of money in the economy that caused people to be in a risk-on environment. They paid exorbitant prices for assets. Suddenly we realized money has a cost. And every time you add 100 basis points of cost of money, everything comes down. So what you're seeing is a re-rating of valuations in the market across the board. You're seeing it in equities because they're the fastest to react. You will see it in house prices. You will see it in costs of goods and services over time as interest rates start impacting inflation. So you are seeing that happen, which means we're back to a scenario where people have to manage risk and execution, which sets valuations at a certain pace. Now, if you're lucky enough to have arbitraged that opportunity and saved a lot of money and put it on your balance sheet for a rainy day, you're in a good space. If not, all you've done is you had a very big meal, and you're going to suffer indigestion because you're going to have to pay for it.
Yeah, well, speaking of indigestion, the last big correction was the 2015, 2016, and then we've sort of seen this exuberant cycle with unicorns being minted practically every other day. How do you look at what's happening in India specifically today? What do you make of the depth of entrepreneurship, the depth of business models?
I would contend that India hasn't seen the cycles yet. And what I mean by that is a cycle is when you enter and you exit. We see a lot of investment, we see a lot of markups, we haven't seen a lot of exits. All exits are either strategic buyers buying assets or a few IPOs. And there's still a lot more unicorns which have to go through that cycle, you call it. So I think this is a bump in the road for a lot of the unicorns which have had re-rating. So hopefully many of these are robust businesses. They can survive the downturn or survive the sort of the cold winter for the next few years, where they either have to go raise money at a lower valuation than they did the last time around, which I think has even more consequences in the Indian ecosystem than it has in the Western ecosystem, because I'm not sure our regulations are designed perfectly in India yet to understand there can be down rounds down to a third, right? So I think, I just as an observer, I'd be curious to see how that is handled. But I think a lot of the companies were building robust businesses, so it remains to be seen how they tide through these times. And there's going to be a healthy requirement for people to focus on profits and cash flows. And I have to give the Indian equity markets credit for that. The Indian equity markets have never quite bought into this ARR multiple or lofty growth expectations. I think the Indian market, like a lot of us in India, says, show me the money.
Well, yes, clearly that has been the case as far as the new listings are concerned.
That's right. And that was pre-re-rating evaluations around the world as well.
Absolutely. So do you believe that the IPOs that people were expecting, and many who were slated to IPO have already pulled back their plans, at least for the foreseeable future? But is that window, the Indian startup IPO window, shut for now?
I think you don't want to be flippant about it, but I think if you build a robust business, and you have profitability to show, or you have the path to profitability very clearly articulated and the market believes you, there's always a window for an IPO. I don't think the IPO window is contingent on lofty valuations in the market. By using the word lofty, we're implying they were above normal. So that means it's more of an arbitrage or more of an opportunistic move to go do an IPO when you believe the valuations are high. And that's great if you got away, but I think there's a difference between being a venture capitalist and being an entrepreneur. A venture capitalist has clearly defined entry and exit criteria. They'll enter cheap and they'll leave when they make a multiple of your money. As an entrepreneur, you're stuck with the consequences. You build a business, you're with it for a long time because you still own a substantial stake in the company. You have obligations to your employees, to your customers, so you don't get to run away. So an entrepreneur has to build a robust business because it has to stand the test of time. I think from that perspective, the window's always open. The question is your business ready?
Yeah.
And if you're telling me there were businesses which had filed for IPO where they were not ready, then that's not a market problem, that's an entrepreneurial problem. So I think the market's open.
Well, speaking of windows of opportunity, let's talk about the windows that you're looking at today. And I would imagine as tech spending increases and people are looking at ensuring that their businesses are secure, there's a lot more coming your way. What does the environment look like, and how are you sort of looking at the future at this point in time?
Well, Shreen, 4.5 years ago when I took on this challenge, the debate always was, is there room for a large, comprehensive cybersecurity player? And the conventional wisdom was, no, everybody should stay in their swim lane and go build a great outcome and let the customer worry about putting them all together. It's clearly over the last 4 years we've heard this in spades. The customers want somebody to come step up and provide a much more comprehensive platform for us from a solution perspective. So we've done that in the last 4 years. So just by that itself, the opportunity is expanded for us. Now, we have been lucky, or perhaps the world has been unaware, that as you get more and more digitally savvy, as you get more and more technologically reliant, and as the attack surface explodes, given we all work from home or everything is connected, the risk of security becomes one of the paramount risks in any organization. And that's become apparent in the last few years. It's become apparent with some supply chain attacks. It's become apparent with nation states at war with each other, either explicitly or implicitly. So from that perspective, yes, a light has been shown on cybersecurity, given the technological reliance that we've had, as well as the acceleration we've seen from the pandemic.
CNBC-TV18 and Palo Alto Networks presents securing the way forward.
You know, speaking specifically of the vulnerabilities that are being attacked at this point in time, I mean, ransomware and the threat of ransomware attacks was through the roof through 2021. You talked about bad actors, whether it is private entities or, governments at play at this point in time. What are you seeing? What are the key targets at this point in time? I mean, infrastructure facilities, so on and so forth. What are the bad actors going after?
You know, it's kind of interesting. The bad actors have evolved just like everybody else. You know, they were in the, you could picture a young kid sitting in somebody's basement whiling away their time gaming and then figuring out that they were very good at technology and they could hack into stuff or they could penetrate certain organizations to prove a point. And you saw that phase. Suddenly, people started to see the economic opportunity associated with that. And you start seeing the economic opportunity, you start saying, how do I go for maximum impact? Do I rely on going after this one individual, this one entity, or do I find a much more platform way, as we say in technology, to go attack that? So you saw this sudden surge in what I call supply chain attacks. What that basically means is if 100,000 companies are using SolarWinds, let me go find a way to hack SolarWinds, because once I can get in there, I can get to the 100,000 customers. Whether that be VMware or Exchange servers or any technology company that has a product that's used by hundreds of thousands of users, if they could find a backdoor into that product, then the door opens for them to hack as many either public or private or government entities in the world. And that became the sort of trend over the last few years, which opens the door for ransomware, because when I can get to 100,000, there's businesses in the dark web which rent themselves out as ransomware as a service. It's a new phrase called RAS, not SaaS anymore, where you could say, hey.
That's SaaS-y as well, I believe. We'll get to that in just a second.
We do acronyms to make sure we can say.
What is RAS?
This is ransomware as a service, saying, I have access to 50,000 companies. If you want to come, go after them, ask them for ransomware, I'll take my share as a licensing fee for letting you in there. Literally, that's what we were dealing with. That's why you saw this explosion last year of thousands of customers who were going to ransomware attacks. And given it's a greenfield opportunity, most governments have not figured out how they want to react to it. I mean, do you let a business pay ransomware and go back on their feet, or do you restrict them from paying ransomware, because that's how many other industries, you're not allowed to pay terrorists or kidnappers in many parts of the world, because they believe that accentuates the problem, that actually perpetrates the crime.
But companies are paying.
Yes, this is the point. Like in ransomware, we still haven't figured out what's the right way to go for it, because companies say, wait, if I'm shut down for a week, I'm shut down for 2 weeks, I'm a colonial pipeline, I can't be shut down. I need to supply oil to the world. So from that perspective, you are seeing that happen more and more. And when that begins to happen, more people see the economic opportunity, and then they go after targets, and they can go after benign companies, or they can go after national infrastructure.
But speaking of acronyms, we were just getting used to RAS and SAS, and now you've added one more. What is SASE?
Well, we've heard about this cloud transformation, where people take their data, their processing from their own data centers and kind of move it to the big public cloud providers, whether it be Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba, Oracle, etc. When you do that, it fundamentally requires you to change the network that you operate. This is how your consumers, how your employees get access to your data. Securing that new network architecture is SASE. It's the hottest thing today, because every company is going through a cloud transformation that requires you to secure the new way, whether it's employees working from home, whether it's customers accessing your data from wherever they are, whether it's you lighting up your stores if you're a large retailer. It requires a whole new way of doing security for your new network, which is coupled with a buzzword called zero trust, where you believe you don't trust anything. So that is the new architecture for the future. There's very few companies who have that capability, and Palo Alto is one of those, and hopefully that becomes another spurt of growth for us going forward.
Speaking of new capabilities as well as future growth, you've been big on inorganic growth. You've done 14 acquisitions so far, and once the indigestion that you spoke of is sorted out, you're probably going to be out shopping again. But what are the capabilities, if at all, that you need to plug at this point in time, and what does all of this mean in terms of future revenue?
Well, Shreen, I don't know is the honest answer. And the reason I say I don't know is, I've had the privilege of working in the Valley for many years now, and it's apparent any technology company that is not obsessively focused on the constant innovation and new products required in the industry eventually becomes obsolete. We were able to take Palo Alto 4.5 years ago and turned around on its head. Today we play in 14 different categories in security. We stitch them together, provide a solution to our customer, and they're all best-of-breed capabilities. Granted, we acquired probably half of them over the last 4 years and integrated them, but the only way we find the answer is by constantly analyzing the market, understanding what's the new trend, understanding what's the new capability the customers want. It was a little easier to do that, to be honest, in the last 4 years because we were not a player in many places. Now we are a player in majority of the cybersecurity categories, so it becomes harder because there is always a debate whether we build it or we buy it. And if you buy it, it becomes harder to integrate and put it together. So we have to be more judicious in the way we put the stuff together. Having said that, I don't believe we can build everything ourselves. I don't believe that we have the monopoly on intellectual smarts in the cybersecurity space. There are lots and lots of smart people out there building amazing stuff, and it will require us to be vigilant, watch them to see if there is something that's going to become the next trend, which might require us to acquire them. But having said that, like we said, the risk-on mode allowed valuations to get ahead of themselves, so it just requires a little bit of settling down in the brains of the entrepreneurs and sellers. And I've never met pessimistic startup founder.
Yeah, well, and that's the nature of the business, isn't it? I mean, you cannot be pessimistic. But let me ask you about India and where India figures in your plans. How aware is corporate India about the risk and treating it as a real risk today? And how are they addressing that? How are they dealing with that? What are the conversations that you're having?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with the technological evolution or the path of evolution that India has taken in the last few years. We've heard that, we've seen that. I think some of the work that's going on in the financial services sector is world class in the way we've built infrastructure in the country, the way it has fostered a variety of startups around the country. And they're all very aware of the fact that they have to build this in a robust and secure way. So the conversations are not us trying to evangelize security. The conversations are them coming to us and asking very sophisticated questions, saying, how do you provide a comprehensive security fabric that we can go secure whatever we're building? Because remember, at some level, the scale that Indian companies need to build to fulfill the promise is bigger than anywhere else in the world. So from that perspective, I think there's ample awareness. I think there's still a paucity of resources in the market because it is a newer challenge that we've recognized. Most of our technology resources in the country are very focused about supporting, maintaining, building large systems. So now we're sort of the new era where we're building amazing solutions for the Indian market. I think there's also awareness at a regulatory level. There's also awareness at the national level. And if there was a magic wand I could wave and ask for a wish, it would be us getting serious about understanding cloud adoption in the country. Because most of the future technologies will be built in the cloud, which will allow for low latency, high bandwidth, high data processing capability, which, by the way, is what we're going to need to deploy AI in this country. So I think if we can get more and more cloud aware in India, if we can leapfrog the technological revolution in a way where we are actually a cloud-first country, it also requires the regulators to be more progressive from a cloud thinking perspective. But if we're able to do that, I don't think there's any stopping us.
Well, what is the deterrent in cloud adoption?
The deterrent typically is that across the world, there is a degree of apprehension in letting all the data sit on the cloud. Because the cloud companies are primarily foreign businesses which put the data in the cloud. So there's a lot of national data requirements, a lot of GDPR-like requirements in Europe, which insist that you keep all the data in one place, in one country.
But now there's localization.
Which is all important. But remember, some businesses require that to be global. I want to be able to see a threat in Korea and be able to deploy the solution in India. I want to be able to see a threat in India and deploy that solution in Germany. So some data needs to be transferred. As long as it's anonymized, as long as it doesn't belong to individuals, it's not compromising any individual's data, I think we should have that flexibility and understanding. And we should also be comfortable deploying cloud-based solutions in our national infrastructure. So all of that stuff is evolving around the world. All I'm saying is that we could leapfrog that if we actually built an understanding and capability, because we're already building it on the financial services sector, we're already building it in the healthcare space. I think it's a matter of time.
You talked about India from a demand perspective, but let's also talk about India from a development perspective, and especially for you. You've got a facility here in Bangalore with 800 plus people. How strategic is India, how core is India to your plans from a development perspective?
Look, it's kind of interesting, having worked in tech for so many years. If you look at companies that have businesses in India or teams in India, the most successful companies from a technology perspective are ones who both serve a local market and deliver for the global market. It's never worked only as a delivery center for global market because there's not enough appreciation or understanding. So as we just talked about, I think there's a huge opportunity for securing the country's infrastructure, securing the infrastructure for thousands of companies, large and small, which allows us to have a large domestic market. Also, I just spent this morning with our team here in Bangalore, who are amazing, by the way, and we had a conversation. I said, look, we want best of breed, bleeding edge product centers in India. We don't want this to be a delivery market. We want innovation to happen here. We want that innovation delivered to the rest of the world and also the local market. So I think it's critical to both our strategy and to actually, we've talked about this. India is the largest democracy in the world, allowing a very stable political environment and more consistency in the way policies are implemented, the more and more consistent the way things are followed too. So I think it's tremendous potential going forward.
Mm-hmm. So are you looking at building out India organically or possibly also inorganically?
I think 4.5 years ago, barely had a presence in India. India now makes up north of close to 10% of our employee base. Indians make up more than that around the world for us. So, there's no question about what has grown fastest at Palo Alto Networks. And hopefully it's all based on performance. If our local teams keep performing, delivering great products for the rest of the world, doing an amazing job in the local market, there's no reason for us to cap the growth.
Mm-hmm. Let me end by asking you, Nikesh, you've been around the block. You've seen
You're calling me old?
You've seen a bunch of cycles. What's different this time? Is anything different this time?
No, it's the early part of the cycle. Remember, we were all very exuberant for a certain period of time. Now all the naysayers are out. People who were hiding in the woodwork saying, I don't like this, they're all back. And suddenly all of us saying, so sort of like it's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, right? Not everybody's seeing this recession. Not everybody's seeing it in demand. But people are hearing about it so much. The only risk is we make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, it is going to happen. It is a cycle. We probably will overcorrect. We will get a little unhappy. We'll probably get a little desolate, a little bit. Some people will get pessimistic. I think the strong people are going to come out stronger. This is a great market for good companies, sane people building robust businesses, and a lot of froth will work its way out of the market. And that's always nice. And after a big meal, you need to go settle it down, sticking with our theme of indigestion.
Well, may the indigestion settle quickly. But Nikesh, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for speaking with us here on The Record. Appreciate your time, and we wish you the best of luck here with your plans in India and back home as well.
Thank you very much, Shireen. Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it then on this edition of On The Record. We'll see you again. Till then, from all of us here on the team, goodbye. Thanks for watching.
CNBC-TV18 and Palo Alto Networks presents Securing the Way Forward.